Hey, it's Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. Welcome to the Black Belt Leadership Podcast, where each week I'm giving you tips, tools, insights, and resources to help you become a better version of who you are and what you do as you discover, develop, and deploy your own Black Belt leader within. When I was growing up, I was a huge fan of the movie The Ten Commandments. Cecil B. DeMille, in my opinion, set the standard that few, even today, have been able to match when it comes to those big, over the top movies. Now, I grew up watching the classics, and it was there that I learned about something called the Academy Awards. That's where Hollywood's greatest and brightest have been recognized again and again, year after year, with an Oscar. Think of an Oscar as the gold medal of movies. I was recently reflecting on this topic as I was flying back from a recent speaking engagement, and I began to ask myself, what's behind an Oscar winning performance? And to take that a step further, I began to ask myself, what is required to truly become world class? And for the next few minutes, that's going to be what I want to talk about. And I want to introduce you to a friend of mine that I met a few years ago, recently departed from this earth, Steve Lambert. Now, if you don't know the name Steve Lambert, he was a Hollywood stuntman. And among his many accolades, the many movies he was involved with, he was Martin Short's double in the movie Interspace. He was River Phoenix's double in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And in the movie The One, he was Jason Statham's double. Now, Stephen also appeared in Time Cop and Escape from LA and Star Trek Insurrection, just to name a few of the many movies that he worked on. He was a stunt coordinator, he was a fight choreographer, he was a martial artist, and he was an actor. Now, sadly, we lost Stephen in 2023, but having met him a few years ago, I began to do some research after he passed away. And that led me to begin to watch the credits at the end of the movies I knew he was in so I could see his name. Now, you know the credits. You know what I'm talking about. It's that endless scrolling at the end of the movie of the nameless, faceless people who work behind the scenes that produce the movie. But one of the things I remember Steven telling me the first time we met in Houston, Texas, was that the people that appear in those credits, even though their name may appear for just a moment, every one of those individuals play a very important integral role in bringing that motion picture to the big screen. Stephen went on to tell me that it was the people behind the movies who actually helped to create the environment that formed the Oscar winning performance that was going to take place once the cameras started rolling. Now, think about that when it comes to the people behind the scenes. And when you're watching all of those credits, think about the roles that they play. There's a script that had to be written, there's a set, and sometimes multiple sets that had to be built. There are costumes that had to be sewn. Ask my wife. She's done that for a show or two. Props that need to be acquired or manufactured. Actors that need to be screened and selected. Scenes that need to be choreographed. Stunts that need to be coordinated. Cameras, lights, microphones that have to be set up in strategic places so that they can capture the motion on the screen. There's graphics that have to be drawn. There's editors that have to piece the story together after the raw filming is done. There's a musical score that has to be written and recorded. There's also a logistics team that has to move the people and the equipment from place to place during the filming. And of course, there's a digital effects team to enhance the footage. And there's a lot of other supporting cast, the cooks, the cleaners, everybody that's involved plays a role. But what the credits reveal, whether you realize it or not, is this. That shows the people and the preparation that was required to make that motion picture a reality. And without the preparation, an Oscar-winning performance is impossible. Remember, preparation precedes performance. You're going to hear me say that several times during this podcast. Now, let's go back to a character I've talked about before, and that's Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps is the most decorated Olympian in history. He trained intensively for 16 years. Get that, 16 years. He logged more than 80,000 meters in a pool every single week. If you do the math, that's just shy of 50 miles a week. And during one intense training period I recently learned about, Michael spent between 3 and 6 hours a day for nearly 6 entire years without taking a single day off. He averaged 25 to 30 hours of training every single week. And what was the end result of that? 28 medals spanning 5 Olympic game appearances. Remember, without the preparation, an Olympic winning performance is impossible. Preparation precedes performance. Did you get that? Preparation precedes performance. Now, another individual I love to talk about, and I use him in a couple of keynotes, is the story of Kobe Bryant. Now, Kobe, in a very famous YouTube interview, tells a story of his relentless preparation in his quest to become a professional basketball player. He spent an average of 6 to 8 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week, either on the court, in the gym, or on the track. He was there mastering the skills that were going to be demanded of him to be able to play at the elite level of professional basketball. But once he made the team, what I loved about Kobe Bryant is he continued his quest to be the best. He was known for his legendary Mamba mentality, and you can look that up later and find out what it's all about. But for the next 2 decades of his life, he still relentlessly started his training every day with a 4 a.m. workout. He maintained an obsessive year-long training regimen to do one thing: continue to maximize his performance. And so the end result of the preparation for Kobe was what? 5 NBA championships, 2 Olympic gold medals, and that spanned an illustrious 20-year career in professional basketball that was cut short by a tragic accident. But remember this, without the preparation, a national championship winning performance would be impossible for Kobe Bryant. Once again, preparation precedes performance. Now, I thought about that when I competed in the SWAT tournament circuit during my time as a sport karate competitor. I would spend hours each week training to prepare for, get this, 3 minutes of competition. Now, that's the length of a sparring match when you're engaged in sport karate. So if I fought 5 times in a single weekend to get to the finals and win, that's a total of 15 minutes or less, depending on how quickly I defeated my opponent. Now, if I was performing open hand or weapons forms, it was about 2, maybe 3 minutes. So I was putting in 8 to 10 hours of preparation every single week for a grand total of less than a half hour of competition time in the ring. Think about that. 8 to 10 hours of preparation every week for 30 minutes or less of time in the ring. But to compete at the highest level, I repeatedly rehearsed the same movements, the same forms over and over, constantly looking for micro improvements where I could get a little bit better. And when I wasn't in the dojo, what was I doing? I was out running, or I was in the gym working out to build my strength and my stamina. Still all of that while running a business and being a dad to 6 kids. It was a challenge, but I did it. The end result for me, I was the #1 ranked competitor in my division in forms, in fighting, and in weapons for 4 consecutive years before I retired from active competition. Did that happen overnight? No. But without the preparation, an award-winning #1 ranked performance for me would have been impossible. I learned and I lived the fact that preparation precedes performance. Now, one of the classic books in the personal growth space is Stephen Covey's classic, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And when you dig into that book, and if you haven't, I strongly encourage it, Stephen emphasizes that preparation isn't just planning. To him, it was a foundational inside-out approach to improving, to improving your effectiveness. Now, Stephen went on to point out that being able to prepare required a few things. It required proactive self-mastery, because that created the private victories over yourself that prepared you for the public victories to come. But that demanded a long-term vision, prioritizing what's important and making sure you continually renew yourself. Now, if we take a trip back in time, let me take you back to Heraclitus. Now, Heraclitus was a Greek philosopher. He predated Socrates, and he was famously known for his doctrine of universal change. He believed the world and the people that lived in it were all in a state of constant change. He summed up his philosophy in one single powerful statement. Here's what he said. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. Now, think about what he just said. The process of change, continuous renewal, that was an opportunity to maintain a state of constant preparation. Now, this is necessary for anyone to achieve mastery at any art, profession, or trade. But the process of change and continuous improvement is also a symbol of constant, ongoing personal growth and development. What am I talking about? Becoming a better version of who you are and what you do every single day. Now remember, without preparation, an award-winning performance is impossible. Don't forget, preparation precedes performance. And where does preparation start? Preparation begins in the mind. And as you've seen me say time and time again, as you think, you say, you do, and you become. Now, in the martial arts, I was introduced to the concept of Shoshin very early on in my martial arts career. It's a philosophy that has its origins in Zen Buddhism. But what it teaches is this, and it's applicable even today. It teaches the importance of embracing what is known as the beginner's mind. That's what Shoshin means, beginner's mind. It serves as a reminder that you and I should approach any subject with curiosity. Because when we're curious, we're open, we're willing to learn. It's a reminder to check our ego at the door, to be willing to challenge established ways of thinking, allowing us to free ourselves from limiting beliefs that often hold us back from saying, doing, and becoming more. Because remember, as you think, you say, you do, and you become. Now, the goal of Shoshin is to constantly recreate yourself. We're talking about personal growth. Why? Because success breeds contentment. Don't forget that. And when you get content, that leads to an acceptance of the status quo. And the quality of thinking that got you to where you are today isn't going to get you where you want to be or need to be tomorrow if your goal is to create an Oscar-winning performance of your life. Now, you don't believe me? Go back and ask Stephen Lambert. Go back and ask Michael Phelps. Go back and ask Kobe Bryant, because they lived that way too. Now, I recently had the opportunity to do something I thought was really, really cool. I got an invitation to be one of a select group of people to take a personal tour of the Fort Lauderdale compound of Patrick Bet-David. I got to see Valuetainment from the inside out. Now, if you don't know the name, he's the author of the incredible book, Your Next 5 Moves. And PBD, as he's known in the industry, is one of the most influential business coaches in the world. He's an Iranian-born American, entrepreneur, author, and media personality. Now, one of the things I found was fascinating was in 2009, PBD founded the PHP agency, People Helping People. Now, this was a multi-level insurance agency, not the first of its kind, but his was a little unique. His preparation to start PHP began 8 years earlier when he started working for Morgan Stanley Dean Witter and later on for Transamerica. And it was there, as he personally practiced the art of Shoshin, he honed his skills as a veteran insurance sales professional. He pitched the idea to the big boys and they said no, so he went and did it on his own. Now, he built this organization incredibly rapidly, and in 2020, just a few years after he started, his rapidly growing PHP agency was acquired by Integrity Marketing Group for a reported $250 million, plus earnouts on future production. Now, PBD's podcast that he has grown from 392 initial live viewers to over 100,000 people that tune in for every episode. He's gaining, by last count, 30,000 subscribers a month, and he's had over 17 million views of some of his recent podcasts. Now, his Valuetainment brand has gone to become one of the premier entrepreneurial brands with a total of over a billion views on YouTube. Now, in his book, Your Next 5 Moves, again, a great book I recommend, PBD utilizes chess as an essential metaphor and the framework for what he teaches. Now, I had the privilege to attend his Vault conference just a few months ago, and it was there he noted that there were 318 trillion, 979 million, 564,000 ways to play the first four moves in chess. And while we're talking about the subject of preparation, and he was mentioning it, he says an amateur, when it comes to chess, thinks 1 to 3 moves ahead. A professional, 4 to 6. A master thinks 7 to 10 moves ahead. But a grandmaster in chess thinks 11 to 15 moves ahead. Now, PBD then asked the audience, so what's your first move? And then what's your next move? And then what's your next? What was he saying? Without the preparation, a champion winning performance is impossible. Remember, preparation precedes performance. And as I said just a moment ago, preparation begins in the mind. As you think, you say, you do, and you become. So what can we learn from the movies, from Stephen Lambert, from Michael Phelps, from Kobe Bryant, and from PBD? If we put all of these things together that I've talked about so far, I believe there are 5 essential takeaways that you need to pay attention to as it relates to preparation. Now, the first one is this: the clarity of vision precedes your preparation. I mean, think about Michael Phelps. When Michael Phelps was training, he visualized the specific races that he was going to swim, the turns and the finishes, all the way down to the stroke count for each lap of the pool. When you look at Kobe Bryant, he not only studied his opponents and teams, but he paid attention to their tendencies, to their footwork, and to the psychology of how they played the game. What was he doing? He was preparing for the moments before they ever happened. In the movie, before a single scene is shot, the directors storyboard every frame. You know, PBD essentially says you can't prepare for what you cannot see. I mean, think about that. Preparation isn't activity. Preparation is directed activity, and it is directed activity toward a clearly defined future state. And without vision, preparation becomes nothing more than motion without progress. Now, the second thing I would say about preparation from what we're learning today is preparation is layered. It's not linear. Michael Phelps trained in technique and endurance and breath control and mental visualization all at the same time. Kobe Bryant layered on skill development with film study, with conditioning and mental toughness to become the best of the best. In the film industry, lighting, sound, wardrobe, and editing all contribute to the acting that's going to take place before the cameras begin to roll. Now, PBD teaches in his podcast and in his books that high performers think in layers. It starts with strategy, and there it moves to execution, and then having contingencies for the what-ifs in life. That essentially leads me to believe that elite preparation is multidimensional. To me, amateurs prepare in a straight line, but professionals prepare in a system. Now, the third takeaway from what we've looked at today is this: anticipation is an edge. You know, when Michael Phelps' goggles filled up with water during the Beijing Games, he still won the gold. Why? Because he had rehearsed the entire scenario mentally. He had swam that race many, many times in his mind. What I loved about watching Kobe Bryant is he didn't react. He anticipated. He often knew what his defenders were going to do before they ever moved. In the same token, great directors behind the scenes in a movie, they anticipate things like a weather change, a mistake, or a technical issue, and they have contingencies already in place for the what-ifs. Now, one of PBD's core teachings is essentially thinking 5 moves ahead. So what do I take from that? Preparation isn't only for success. Preparation is also essential for disruption. If you are prepared, you can perform with confidence under chaos because nothing is going to feel unfamiliar. Now, the fourth takeaway is this: obsession with repetition creates mastery. Michael Phelps swam thousands of laps, even on holidays and weekends, and in doing so, he was building muscle memory that removed all doubt that he could swim those races. Kobe Bryant's Mamba mentality was defined by outworking everyone, often starting at 4 a.m. An Oscar winning performance, remember, often comes after dozens of takes. What sometimes looks natural on the big screen, you got to realize, is deeply rehearsed. Now, PBD himself believes and teaches that mastery is built through repetition, not inspiration. And as a martial artist, I have to agree. Confidence is not a personality trait. Confidence is a byproduct of preparation. When you are prepared, you are confident. And remember, repetition converts uncertainty into instinct. Now, number 5, and the last thing I want to point out would be this: discipline sustains what motivation starts. Michael Phelps followed a grueling, consistent training schedule, even when he didn't feel like it. Day in, day out, for nearly 6 years, without a day off, he swam and swam and swam. Kobe Bryant maintained the elite standards of training year-round. His Mamba mentality existed 365 days a year, not just during the NBA season. Now, PBD defines motivation as a short-term driver of success, but he goes on to say discipline is a long-term driver of success. To me, preparation is sustained by discipline. I think the difference between average and elite is not just knowledge. To me, it's more consistency over time. And that really takes us back to where we started. Because when the credits roll at the end of an Oscar-winning film, what do? We celebrate the performance. We cheer for the stars. But in truth, get this, the performance is often overlooked. And that performance was determined long before the cameras ever started rolling. It was the producer, it was the director that started with the end in mind. Thank you, Stephen Covey. And they cast a vision of the future to all the faceless people you see in the credits. And together, all of these people prepared in advance for what would be an Oscar-winning performance. And in the very same way, the victories of Michael Phelps and Kobe Bryant and other incredible people throughout history were not won in the spotlight. They were earned, not won, they were earned in the unseen hours of preparation in the pool, preparation on the court, preparation in the gym, preparation on the track, and preparation in their mind. As Patrick Bet-David teaches in his book, Your Next 5 Moves, he says those who rise to the next level of success are not reacting to the moment. They are executing a plan, and I love this, executing a plan that they prepared long before the moment starts. They are thinking 5, 10, even 15 moves ahead. I think we could summarize all of this up with a quote from former heavyweight boxing champion Joe Frazier. Here's what he said: champions are not made in the ring. They're merely recognized there. But what you cheat on early in the morning will show up under the light of the ring. Remember this: preparation is not a single act. To me, preparation is a habit. Now, Stephen Covey, in the book, The 7 Habits of Highly People, he reminds us that effectiveness is built through consistent disciplines, not occasional effort. Successful people do daily what unsuccessful people do sometimes or not at all. And what he says in the book is you've got to be proactive and you've got to prepare before the circumstance demands it. Again, same principle that applies to the martial arts applies in life. You've got to begin with the end in mind to define the outcome before you ever begin the work. You got to put first things first so you can prioritize preparation over distraction. And these habits that we've talked about, they echo in the mindsets of a Michael Phelps or a Kobe Bryant or a Rory McIlroy. Pick the great that's out there because it reinforces the strategic discipline that's taught in the book, Your Next 5 Moves. Now, I want you to think about that because in the end, preparation is more than strategy. Preparation is your character, who you are on the inside. It is your character on display. Now, I want you to remember this. It's not what you do one time that defines your performance, but it's what you do consistently, day after day after day, long before the moment arrives. Now, highly effective people don't rise to the occasion, they prepare for it. How do they prepare for it? Habit by habit by habit. And they're building those habits long before the moment ever arrives. They understand an essential truth of preparation. And that truth is this: the spotlight reveals what preparation has already decided. So, my question to you is this: what does your preparation reveal about you? I'm Dr. John Terry, the Black Belt Leader. Thanks for joining me, and have a great day.